I had a midfoot fusion for something called a Lisfranc injury, or in my case a Lisfranc dislocation, because I completely tore a ligament in my right foot. I explained this injury more in another video, which I am linking both in this video and also including in the video description. I was originally misdiagnosed, and then when I finally received the correct diagnosis from an orthopedic surgeon about 5 or 6 months later, I was so afraid of the surgery because the surgeon said that it was most likely going to be 3 to 6 months off of work and then 9 to 12 months for a full recovery, which I found incredibly frightening. So I talked to him about all other options, including physical therapy and getting orthopedic inserts made for my feet to put in my shoes. I was not ready for a surgery like the type he was describing, and I could not imagine that recovery process and going through having the hardware installed and then needing to have pins removed from my foot later on. I realized that that was a relatively minor concern in comparison to everything else, but I was just in such a state of shock over the recovery time and the diagnosis that I just didn't know what to think. Since I'd already been walking around with my injury for so long, the surgeon said that the surgery didn't need to happen immediately and that conservative treatment might help for a little while, but that I was going to eventually need to come back for the surgery because it wasn't an injury that was going to get better on its own. I did go to physical therapy and had an amazing physical therapist who worked with me to make sure that I understood what to continue doing on my own, but 5 years later I began developing mild arthritis in my right knee and my foot was hurting much more. When I finally met with the surgeon who performed the midfoot fusion, I was excited for the surgery to finally fix the injury that I had been dealing with for so long, over 5 years, but also afraid of what my foot was going to be like after the surgery. So what was I so afraid of? One of my biggest fears was that my foot was never going to be the same. When I researched surgeries for Lisfranc injuries, there were so many complaints of hardware causing unnecessary pain and needing to either get the hardware removed or just living with the pain of the hardware forever. I was afraid of potential permanent discomfort or pain from the hardware. A little over 5 years after my injury, though, I was having so much difficulty driving and walking around. That was when I realized that I was probably in more pain than what I feared about the pain from hardware, and that was one of the things that forced me to feel ready for the surgery. My arthritic knee was also giving me some trouble, especially in the stairs, and I was beginning to better understand the effect that my injured foot was having on the rest of my body because of how unstable it had become. It was then that I also realized it was time to face my 3 absolute biggest fears about the surgery. 1, being completely dependent on other people to take care of me, and that was for an extended period of time. 2, to have super limited physical activity for 6 to 8 weeks while non-weight bearing after the surgery. And 3, not being able to drive for about 3 months after my surgery since I had injured my driving foot. I was also afraid of not being able to exercise regularly and walk for at least 8 weeks because exercise is how I deal with stress, and the surgery and the recovery was definitely going to be stressful. But my biggest coping mechanism was going to be taken away from me for the first 2 weeks after the surgery, and then it was going to be very limited while non-weight bearing, and I was afraid of taking my anxiety out on my friends and family since I wasn't going to be able to do my daily walks and go to the gym 4 times a week like I usually did. And here was what was probably my silliest fear. I was afraid that my friends and family were going to get sick of having to help me, but that was something that never happened at all during the recovery. Many people have pointed out to me that I have difficulty asking for help even when it's something that people would be happy to do for me if only they had known what I needed, and this was going to be a time when I was going to have to be asking for a lot of help. And this was something that was giving me a bit of a sense of dread because I knew I was going to need to be asking for help with even the most basic things that I haven't needed help with since being a little kid. I am now about 4.5 months out from my surgery. Progress is slow and I do have to be careful, but I have come so far since my surgery, and my foot is so much better than it was before. My foot gets sore from activity and I have to take a lot of breaks, and I do still have pain, and the hardware causes a good bit of pressure most of the time, so I do feel aware of its presence unless I'm distracted. Recovery comes, and it is insanely difficult work, and the recovery takes its mental toll. And yes, it all sounds terrifying before the surgery, but with the right surgical team, with the help of a physical therapist, and with the support of the people who are important to you, it is all worth it, and I don't say that lightly. Although I am still on what my surgeon calls conservative treatment until I hit the 6-month mark after my surgery, and I'm still putting in a lot of work to recover from the injury and the surgery, I am so happy I finally went through with it. I am on my way to getting back the life that I have really been missing. So to those of you who are also going through a rough time with injuries and surgeries, you've got this. You can do it.